You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
Yum Washington is the July 4 movie Martyr needs but won't understand, based on an article by Matthew Russer. The problem is not Washington, it's the men who refuse limits. A film review that accidentally clarifies the crisis. The source article uses Yum Washington as a vehicle to contrast George Washington's restraint with Donald Trump's appetite for domination. It argues that Washington learned humility, accepted civilian authority, and refused kingship, while Trump rejected the 2020 election and tried to turn personal grievance into political fact. It also admits, almost in passing, that the movie sands off Washington's racism and the violence built into the republic he helped found. That is the useful part. The rest is a familiar American reflex: worship a dead founder, then pretend the living crisis is just a test of character. Trump was the decision maker. The central fact is not ambiguous. Trump lost in 2020 and refused to accept it. The source cites the mountain of failed litigation, the conservative report that flattened the fraud claims, and the Arizona review that confirmed the loss. This was not confusion. It was an attempted transfer of reality itself, carried out through Republican partisanship, legal theater, and the cult of loyalty around one man. That matters because power was not floating around in the abstract. Trump held the presidency. He had the visibility, the machinery, the megaphone, and the authority of office. He chose to use all of it to poison the election result he did not like. That is the decision that counts. Washington's virtue is not the story. The review leans hard on Washington as the anti-Trump, modest, bookish, Republican, anti-king. Fine. Washington did repeatedly step back from power, and the source is right to treat that as historically significant. But the article also gestures at the cost of that myth-making by noting Washington's racism, the slavery, and the indigenous dispossession behind the republic. That tension should not be smoothed over. Washington is useful here not as a saint, but as evidence that republics survive only when office holders accept limits. The point is institutional, not devotional. A president leaving after 2 terms is not a personality trait. It is a rule that must be defended against the kind of man who mistakes public office for private property. The framing still lets too much off the hook. The source correctly identifies Trump as the immediate author of the damage, but it still narrows the problem too much around one corrupted personality, as if authoritarianism were mainly a matter of bad posture and moral cowardice. That framing is incomplete. Trump did not create the conditions alone. He exploited a political class trained to excuse him, a party willing to turn itself into a loyalty machine, and institutions that took far too long to impose consequences. The courts rejected most of the post-2020 lies. Yes, but the larger system still spent months entertaining a fantasy that should have been treated as an attempted coup from the start, because that is what it was. The issue was never whether Trump understood Washington. The issue was whether enough power brokers were prepared to act like they believed the republic applied to them too. Obedience is not legitimacy. One of the best lines in the source comes from the political science professor. Obedience can be commanded. Respect must be earned. That is the whole case against Trump in one sentence. He wanted the title without the consent, the authority without the restraint, the trappings of office without the obligation to lose. That is why Washington matters in this story, not because he was perfect, but because he understood that republics die when law becomes a costume for personal rule. The movie review knows this, even if it keeps drifting back toward inspirational language. Washington's real relevance is not that he was admirable. It is that he helped establish a norm Trump tried to burn down. That is the conflict. The pattern is bigger than one election. This story is not about a movie, and it is not even mainly about Washington. It is about the recurring American habit of treating democratic survival as a matter of individual virtue, while ignoring the structures that reward abuse. A republic does not fail all at once. It fails when power is personalized, when loyalty replaces law, when institutions hesitate to name a lie, and when elites keep framing deliberate destruction as if it were just another partisan disagreement. Trump is the face of that collapse. The system that tolerated him is the mechanism. Washington's greatest political lesson was not greatness. It was exit. Trump's defining act was refusal. Everything else is ornament. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to AlterNet for today's article with the automated voice of LJ. Thanks for listening.